the thing. It's hard to distinguish. You know, because like whatever you're talking about is important to you. And especially in that moment. And was it in this class I was talking about functions, objects? Oh, too bad. I wasn't actually going to say anything about this, so I guess there's no harm in it. When you guys walk into a room and you see that, what do you see?
Chair. Oh, it
Yeah.
was?
Oh, you did
talk
talk
about
about
it,
it.
yeah.
Okay. So we talk about functions and what things are used for. So when you're thinking about that, your conversation that you're having with someone that's about some nonsense, like, I don't know, pineapple on pizza. What's the function of that? Taste? I mean, the conversation. Unless you're tasting the conversation. Do that too. That's your homework assignment. Be talking to someone, just start going.
Entertainment.
Entertainment.
You're bored, is it?
Maybe you're bored. What else might take people?
I don't know, maybe getting to know the person.
Okay. And that's lots of that. Get to know them like a human being. And I used a word to describe that. Empathy. Yeah, in other words, you're using that conversation as a way to get to know the person. And when we're asking about get to know the person, of course, is what's the purpose of getting to know the person? Well, clearly you want to be able to manipulate them and use them as an object in the world. Yes?
Yes.
Psychopaths. If that's your purpose, then you know, obviously it's essential because you're going to use them for something. But if instead what you're doing is you're being empathetic because you want to get to know them and you want to get to kind of be known, then you're using that conversation for the purpose or the function of intimacy, bringing people together, becoming close with someone. And so, is there anything that's more valuable to humans than interpersonal connection, empathy, being intimate with someone? Well, if not, if there is nothing more important than that, then it seems that the conversations that we have, as nonsensical as they might appear to be, they do serve a really important function, which is bringing people together. So therefore, the speech is essential. It is necessary. It's very useful. I mean, think about some of the conversations that have helped you like bond with people. Were they deep philosophical conversations? Sometimes not. But I mean, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, then you try to find some other means. So the conversation, if you're thinking, wow, how can I get to know a person? You know, I want to form a human connection with this person. Which, by the way, most of us probably don't think of it that way. We probably don't sit down and look at someone and go, how's it going? I want to form a deep personal human connection with you. It would probably be very difficult to do that if you introduce yourself that way. But that is the underlying motive underneath it. That, you know, even the unconscious motivation. And so we'll have those conversations with people, again, as a way of bringing us together in these ways, which makes it essential. And this is one of those rare moments that I forgot my point. Oh, wow. This doesn't happen often. Huh. This won't make it into the video. I'm going to edit this out and fast forward it and just say what I was saying here was too brilliant for human ears. So I have to fast forward over it. Okay, so who cares what the conversation is about? It might be about, maybe you'll sit down and you'll ask the person, how do you feel about pineapple on pizza? If that helps you to form a human connection, then that's what it is. So what do you think about the abortion debate? Maybe that's the deep philosophical conversation that will bring people together. Whatever it is. I guess, yeah, what speech is essential and what speech is not essential becomes very fluid. And didn't we learn that in the past 2 years? What counts as essential and what counts as inessential is kind of odd, you know? We have essential workers. So I don't think they know the meaning of the word essential. So what becomes essential becomes kind of dependent on the context. Now, we all kind of know when something is not essential. And we all have classes with people who do this. They'll sit there and they're oftentimes probably not even paying very close attention. They're like on their phone or something like that. And then they'll just blurt stuff out that they think is funny. And it's designed to kind of be funny. It's designed to distract. but it certainly isn't designed to contribute in any way. If it was, the best way, of course, to make it funny is to make it contribute in some way, while also be funny. That's difficult to do. It's easy just to, like, blurt something out about farts or something like that. It's difficult to make your commentary actually contribute while also making people laugh. And that's a skill, of course, hopefully that people learn, and that, as you heard me say, that the class clown does serve a really important function, which is to tell the truth, and then also to make people, and also to entertain and make people laugh. You got to put these two things together. You don't want to be someone who doesn't do both of those things. You want it to be useful in some way. So sometimes people will blurt things out that are just not essential. They don't really contribute anything. And then sometimes it will be, but it's hard to figure out what that is, because I wonder how many of us would consider. I wonder how many of us would consider philosophers to be essential. Now, I wonder how many philosophers would consider YouTubers to be essential. But I imagine that there's going to be some differences between those two groups. Now, which of those groups is actually really essential? Yes. Yes. Both. They both serve a function, some kind of a function. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. If things don't serve a function, they go away. Just like if our conversations between people are non-essential, you're going to find that it's difficult to carry that on. You ever start trying to talk to somebody, and neither of you really have anything at all to say, and then the conversation just like falls there, and you're just like, yeah, all right, yeah. That's interesting, because it tells us that awkwardness is instructive. It tells us something really important about human interactions. In other words, it's awkward that when you have two people who can't connect in this one way, because it feels like we should be able to. And we should. We just haven't found the way yet. For example, if I'm talking to Lucille, what do you suppose there's something I would talk to him about if I didn't know him?
Ghosts.
What's that? Ghosts. What do you think happens after we die? Anybody else?
Who?
Lucille. Guy in the corner talks sometimes.
His son.
Yeah, I ask him about games. Probably. PlayStation. If I'm feeling a bit brash, I'll point and go, PlayStation. He'll look at it and I'll boop his nose. Complete stranger. But I'll probably ask him about PlayStation, ask him about games, And you don't necessarily want to sit there and go, I noticed from your hoodie that you play PlayStation. Yes. Okay. I noticed from your shoes that you don't want to start dissecting the person necessarily in front of you, but there's a lot of things that are there that you can gather about. And if the purpose there is this, which I would suggest to you, that this, I'm growing more and more to believe that this is the focus of most of our conversation. It is empathy. We do this to form empathy with people. And empathy means to understand what they're going through, to feel actually what it is that they're going through. Versus sympathy, which is just to feel bad for somebody. Empathy means you can feel it. And so I suggest, I'm growing more and more to think that that's really what we're after when we're talking to people, even if it doesn't seem like it. Now, you can't just go diving right into what scares you the most. Maybe that's not the first word. Maybe that's not the first question out of your mouth. Maybe it's, oh, what games do you play? You don't want to ask something like, there's some Japanese on his hoodie. I probably wouldn't want to ask him, oh, do you speak Japanese? So if I ask you, oh, do you speak Japanese? Me neither. So what do you think? Should we have dropped that bomb during World War II? This is a weird conversation to have. Maybe you want to edge into it with, oh, PlayStation, you play video games. Oh, me too. And then maybe after a little while, ask him how he feels about wiping out 150,000 people with a bomb. Well, it is what it is. And so, or 2 bomb threats, sorry. I want to give full credit for 2 bombs. But the thing is that the person who's essentially capable of remaining silent. So why do you have to remain silent? Some of you take this too seriously.
So you heard.
So you can hear what's being said. I imagine that's why you're all silent. I imagine that's why you all ignore me, because you want to hear every word I have to say, because you realize the value of every word. Now, you have to, in a conversation, you have to be able to be silent. And what that means is that you have to listen to what the person is saying, not just waiting for your chance to talk. You ever, I've been talking with someone, and then they almost interrupt you and they catch themselves, but then they'll stop. Yeah. And you probably realize if you look at their face that everything after but is not being heard. It's almost like they're just waiting for their chance to jump into the conversation there, but they're going to be polite by not. So in other words, everything that comes after that is, you may as well just say blah, 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 blah. That's what's going to get picked up. We don't necessarily want to be that person, because the person's talking to you, whatever they're saying they think is important to you. But you want to actually hear what people are saying, because the teacher's talking. Obviously, the teacher thinks it's important. I don't come up here like, what can I tell them I think is unimportant? Now, we can disagree if it's important or not. But the funny thing is that a lot of people miss it and think it's unimportant, and that's because they're not paying attention in the first place. If some earth-shattering truth was revealed in class, you'd never know it, because you weren't looking for it, you weren't paying attention for it. You know, it's like walking home and saying, well, there's nothing interesting in the world happening. So you put on a pair of like those horse blinders and you walk home like this. Will you notice anything important or interesting in the world? No, of course not. And in fact, you'll probably be convinced that the whole world is just this ugly gray, stone, this concrete that you're walking on. Everything looks like that. There's no such thing as a tree, even. Because you'd miss it, because you have your blinders on. Of course, the wider your blinders, the more it is that you're going to see of the world. The goal, hopefully, for many of us is to remove those things entirely so we can see the sky as well as the concrete and not think that the world is only one or the other, but to understand the varied nuances of all of it, and of course the beauty in all of that novelty. So if you're able to remain silent, you're able to take in all of the things around you openly, then the value of that is that your life becomes incredibly rich, incredibly rich. But only then you're able to speak essentially, because you can take in things. You can take in discussions and arguments and things like that. Like, I know it's a hot issue right now, the whole abortion thing. And I remember a time, I think I was talking to someone recently, I was telling him, you probably remember this, there was a time when we used to, students got really tired of writing about abortion. Because for some reason, that was like the go-to for a lot of teachers. We had to write a persuasive essay. What do you think about abortion and why? And it's funny now, we can fast forward 8, 10 years, and now it's just like, oh, we're not supposed to talk about that. So, it's so offensive and it's so personal, we just shouldn't talk about that. It's weird that we went from this one thing that people were tired of writing about to now never discussing it. And last period it came up for the first time in any of my classes, and that's why it was on my mind. All I'm going to say about it is that it's interesting that people who have never really thought about the issue have become online experts about it and just posting, whether people who are in favor of it or whether people are against it, whatever. I wonder how much time people have really spent thinking about the issue and figuring it out. Like, one of the things that came up last period was we kind of got this idea that what essentially matters is the question of what is it? What is a fetus? Is it a human being or not? And however you answer that question is probably going to determine what you think about the issue. Whatever you think about it is immaterial to me. But it's interesting that this one question that I started off close to the beginning of the whole school year with. I asked that question of what's it mean to be a person? What's it mean to be a human being? Many of us were like, oh God, whatever. Because it's a really important thing, because it determines a lot. And if that's too much for us to think about, then maybe the issue is too much for us to talk about. Because we don't really understand what's going on. Maybe we just shouldn't participate in it because there are real things that hinge on it. Real lives hinge on these things. So, and I know it's comfortable to have a ready-made view of lots of things. It's not just that one issue. It's lots of issues, But if it's worth reposting about, maybe it's worth finding out about. Because only then, once you really listen to everything that's being said, then you can start to speak essentially. In other words, you can start saying the things that really do matter, and not just the nonsense. Because I hope we can all agree that we don't need more nonsense. And we need more self-awareness. And maybe that will be better. What do I know? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?